Hello and welcome to Writing Critiques, where we critique writing from around the internet. My name is Vin, and today we're looking at a piece by Reddit user In the Interest of Time. Remember that you can submit your writing to the email down below, but when I don't have writing to do, I seek to places like Reddit. This is from fantasy writers in Reddit. This piece is sci-fi/fantasy, and I believe it's from a book. You'd have to double check, and again, just click the link in the description to go to the original post and leave your own remarks there. But this is, I believe, from a book called Children of Ash. I've already loaded this up with my virtual assistant here. Let's see if I can get this going. So we're going to do the usual. So I'll have the virtual assistant read it out, and then I'll be doing my critique afterwards. You can follow along, read on screen, or mute her. It's up to you. And you'll see me highlight things as we go along. So let's start in 3, 2, 1.
What do you remember best about that day in War and Dag? Ilian allowed his silence to speak for him as he mustered the memory, painful and hot. I remember, he said, his throat growing tight. Dust. The cityscape was stricken with the mangled bodies of his fallen brethren. Scalefolk, human, normal, Arcani, didn't matter, the bombs had struck them all the same. God is not here. Ilian remembered that thought louder than the discharge of rifles, the rockets, the inhuman screams. Ilian. It was Jace, his banded greatsword shimmering in the light. The whistling of a rogue mortar raced close, and the greatsword shimmered with otherworldly energy as he whirled the great thing around, a veritable cyclone of chaotic, arcane protection. The mortar struck the shield and threw Lord Jace to a knee, and Ilian covered his face as the dust choked the air between them. We were in the heart of the enemy's home. It was the closing days of the war. I think I don't remember what happened after that day. Just the pounding of his own heart. Ilian could feel it right then, even in the safety of that room. I was in the company of Lord Jace, Premier of House Wreck, and a dear friend to me. Ilian regained his steps as Jace himself reappeared, gripping his collar. We must retreat, Jace said, with a drip of fear. Yes, fear, bright and true, finally broken through the stoic man's facade. They will overturn their own capital if it means killing us. The dead and dying around them echoed his sentiment. We were asked to regroup, Ilian said. But I had this feeling, and Ilian felt it too. It was fear, bright and true and equally infectious. Ilian recomposed himself as the shells fired from a distant, desperate foe. In the shadow of a towering spire, Ilian could make out the scaled featured of Rasamark and his scalefolk warriors ducking down into the dirt. Beyond, Captain Borkaran rallied the tattered remains of Kyle and company. Then another barrage whistled in from the skies above and delivered the retort of the Drakkar forces. Dust tossed up and obfuscating them again before settling down around them. They would die here in this hole, under the shadow of their deluded foe. No. Ilian had seen too many good soldiers and civilians burn for this war. We had one chance. One chance to take the city center. One chance when our companies had already pushed so hard and so far and given so much of themselves to see this fight end. We're so close, Ilian said through grated teeth. Not a goddamned chance. And so he rose onto aching knees and bloodied knuckles, rose above the dampened spirits that choked on the dust and death. I shouted the words of my upbringing, even if no one could hear them. I screamed to the world in Siva. He let go from his dust-choked lungs. Unbroken. The word of Elinai the Wanderer, now his. Ilian, Jace said, trying to clutch at him, but he could not stop him. Down the broken avenue, past the Drakkar defenses, he could see it. The proud and haughty edifice of the Drakkar citadel, the Hall of Alkan, the beating heart of the last vestiges of the Drakkar tyranny. Cut the serpent's tail, and he may continue to strike. Remove its head, and it may only writhe and die. From the depths of his soul, Ilian conjured all of his power, the God-given powers of an Arcani. No, he was no lost orphan boy in that moment. He was not the lonesome wanderer anymore. No longer did he fashion his soul after that of Elinai. No, this was the end of the road. Live or die, here on the slopes to Alkun. He conjured all the intensity of 2 decades of pain and failure, of disappointment, of loss, and cast from his hands. Jace tugged at his arm trying to pull him. Ilian felt, but too locked into that moment was he that he felt none of that effort to save him at all. I remembered the world growing dark around me, my friends pulling at me, and I nearly lost control and passed out from the effort. But soon enough I stood, and rally. Jace said, with a long pull of Euphorian drawl. Rally to me. And soon, Ilian was not alone. His soldiers, yes, they were there now, the soldiers of Dog Company, even Shan, Learman, Malkin Fair Orc with his Fair Orc axe glistening in the sun. Rufina's red hair darkened with the loud brightness of her arcane energy, but the world grew dark as Ilian focused his power, forming a great shield in his mind, and as his allies surrounded him and returned fire from rifles and the energy channeled in their swords, that resolved to make a shield grew larger, tangible, until he screamed with the effort and cast it beyond himself, out into the world. I learned young how to form arcane shields. It made me feel safe, but more strongly did I feel that I could save my friends. And I knew if that shield fell, it would not only be the end of me, but my friends. And then it was done. The ball of energy formed between his hands, and like a net expanded and fled from his grasp, cast into the sky, high above the crumbling towers of Warrentag, above the range of the siege guns and beyond any shield he had ever mustered. By the spirit he heard the raspy, garbled reptilian voice of Rasa Mark say, "Now is the chance to get our forces out of this sector," Maeve Borkeran said, voice strained and distant. It seemed all their forces had converged. "We moved them out, no," Ilian shouted past the strain. Rockets pounded the shield now, and Ilian fell to a knee. A blood vessel burst and sent a shallow trickle of blood down his forehead. He could feel every part of him straining from the effort. "To Alkun!" He roared as he rose to 2 feet and took a tentative step forward. The rockets rained, the shield spattered from the minuscule small arms that the Drakars were throwing at them. The street was bathed in otherworldly blue. "To Alkun!" He drug out again, and then his rage was made manifest as tendrils of hot fire struck out from the shield that towered above the city. There was no going back now. No stopping him. Forward victory, or death. Ilian trembled from the memory, but his voice was steady. He had locked his vision with the piece of paper before him, but now he locked his eyes with Hallman Luca, the soft-faced television host. "Forward!" Ilian screamed above the pain. "Forward!" Jace shouted, with renewed vigor. "Forward!" The soldiers of Dog Company echoed, then the Scalefolk warriors of Clan Mark, even the Corlanders of Maeve Borkeran's Kylan Company. Soon the Tritani would be on their tail, but they would know who won their war. Alricians. It was the hardest battle I ever fought. Every step took all the strength I had in me, and then some. But the halls of Alkun were not even half a click off, far less. In fact, I believe that I can't say now. Drakar regiments converging on us, Rasa said. They knew the threat that was marching towards them. Ilian smiled through gritted teeth. Let them come, he thought, let them come and try. They wanted to stop him, but they would not. Shan, radio into 5th Fleet, call air support. Drakar made Waljan fighters streaked across the sky. Turning to dive, we marched along that broken road. Fought past barricades. Artillery didn't matter. I couldn't let the shield break, not even when it started to peel away at my flesh. Aircraft, mortars. It seemed like every soldier and gun in the Drakar forces had turned towards us. But the same could be said of our own friends. The Waljan craft exploded into flaming streaks. Admiral Ortilian had kept his promise. Citalonian Sky Knights ripped past them in a delta formation, then parted as they dropped their payloads on a block between the shield and the halls of Alkun. Tritani are making a push on the blocks east of here, Shan said, translating the radio garble. Drakars are pulling back for us, Jace said, and then sent a rippling cut of energy towards the first floor of a building to their flank. An unfortunate Drakar fell, smoking and eviscerated. We pushed them all the way back to the fringes on the halls of Alkun, Ilian said, recounting the memory. It was his last for a long time, yet sat so strongly. And then? We reached it, and his breath caught in his throat. I let go.
Okay, that's all. I'll stop there. This actually goes on for a little bit longer there, but I got the gist of it. I would say that you are taking a chance. This writer, holy cow, what was the writer's name again? In the Interest of Time, the book called Children of Ash. Far out. I'm just processing it. So yes, the chance you're taking is with this nonlinear storytelling. I'm not sure if I like it or not. I'm leaning towards no, because the scene you're portraying is frantic. It's essentially the climax of some kind of battle, and everyone listening can obviously attest to. But you're taking a frantic scene and then you're interleaving it with an explanation, and I guess you're trying to do some interleaved form of exposition here, and you're also letting the reader know that whoever watching he survives and he can recount these events, obviously. So you're doing a couple of things there back to back to back. But the fact that you cut back and forth mid frantic scene for me is a bit much. For people listening, obviously it's a bit hard to follow with just if you're only listening to the AI assistant. She didn't do that well with really breaking and pausing between the flashes back and forward. But again, if someone's listening an audiobook to an audiobook of this, if it ever goes that far, or if they just lose concentration for a moment there, they'd have no fucking idea where they are in the scene. They have no idea where they are in the scene. And I don't really have a good picture of where he is right now. I assume he's in this city they're storming, just after the battle you're watching. I assume that's the case. But even then, I don't know. I don't hate it because like I could keep up with it to some degree, and the reasons I didn't hate it primarily is because I like little moments where you did the smart thing of starting a thought in the recount and then finishing it in the present, or vice versa, starting a thought in the present and then finishing it in the recount. I didn't mind that, but it also comes off as a bit tacky. Like in this one, I had this feeling, and Alien felt it too. Like, yeah, you're repeating yourself, and I'm not sure how you wrote this. It has the feeling of you writing all the italic stuff first and then inserting the non-italics. And if you didn't, then I guess good for you. You fooled me. But the reason I said that is because the italics feels relatively contiguous, especially with bits here that and Alien Filter 2. I assume that follows relatively fluently from the previous italic section. And yeah, no, I'm coming down on the firm. No, I don't like it. Not because it's terribly done. It's done okay, but because it's adding a layer of complexity here that isn't needed. Because if I was to describe your learning curve, it's a wall. You have a learning wall. You usually do a curve, so you're slowly introducing someone to new concepts, new world, new magic system. The fact that I really like this line because it does a lot of heavy lifting. The mortar struck the shield and threw Lord Josh to the knee. To be fair, when you said that, I pictured like a shield, like a normal shield, and I was like, that's interesting. There's like this weird like sword and shield group versus a militaristic group, and yet somehow surviving. That got my interest. But then I figure out later, obviously, that he explains more like an energy shield, magical energy shield or some shit. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, so you have the rapid requirement for a reader to figure out what the fuck's going on. Interleave with the fact that you're going back and forth to time. Do one of those things. Do one of those goddamn things. A great example is the book series called the Powder Mage Trilogy. Not anything like this, really. It's far more grounded than this piece. But the Powder Mage Trilogy starts just after one of the main characters kills a whole cabal and the royal family. That's how the book starts. And you don't start with him, though. You start with if I remember correctly, an old man waking up in his house, and it turns out he's a detective, and he's escorted by some soldiers to the main palace where he finds one of the main characters sitting on the staircase, and his hands covered in blood. So it's a really interesting, like slow burn opening to a very like gigantic event in the case of the world, and he does that partially just to give you that ease into the world, and it allows him to tell a linear story despite stuff happening in multiple periods of time. In that, like the events that happened prior to the opening scene of the book or scenes of the book are revealed later in the book. at least to recount. Don't know if you ever leave through them in the moment, but whatever, on screen. But whatever. That is an example of a very good learning curve in this kind of like rapid introduction to a fantasy world, new magic system, a bunch of other things. So for you, you are doing a rapid introduction to new fantasy world, new magic system, and a bunch of other things, but you're doing it in this really herky-jerky way. Sorry, I've been laboring at that point. The way I would ease the reader, into this is I would, and you really want to go back and forth, or not back and forth. You really want to go start with some level of in the present before jumping to the past. I would start with, you have a couple options. I would definitely start with just a chunk in the present, followed by the rest in the past, and then the end in the present. So I do chunk, main body, end, and that's it. I wouldn't do what you're doing here, which is going back and forth in between, because it makes it too herky-jerky. That's, again, personal opinion, but this is what I would suggest. Beyond that, I would consider doing something similar to Powder Mage, maybe like a paragraph or two from one person's perspective, or a side character, even a throwaway character's perspective, and have them meet the person you're talking about, set the scene so you can ground us a bit as a reader, because at the moment when you're starting this close to the action, some readers need some description to ground them before they can even start picturing what you're describing. Personally, I'm happy to start with a dialogue just in the middle of it, but a lot of people who have listened to my work, for example, in the past, have wanted some description up front just to ground them in the scene, and you do not offer much of that at all. So maybe consider that just a beat slower of an opening, just a couple of beats, maybe 1-2 paragraphs. Person walks into dilapidated palace, finds man. I'm just stealing this Power Mage, but fuck it, whatever, it works, and it's being used elsewhere as well. Finds person, okay, whatever. Let's just say person walks up to general as he looks over the battlefield, and the general and the person is concerned, gives you a chance to describe the battlefield, describe the general, and then ask him what's happening, and then he turns, and then you cut back to the past, and you do the rest from the general's perspective, the scene as you've written it here, then cut back to present, and you can finish out the scene and jump to the next chapter. That's how I would consider doing this, instead of going constantly back and forth as you've done. Aside from that, all right, now that I've belabored that point, let's talk about the rest here. I like how you've woven in some backstory about this main character, and that's why I've been doing a lot of highlighting here. Arcana, you've given us a naturalistic way in the middle of the action to tell us your fantasy names. You tell us he's an orphan. It's a bit, come on, everyone knows that's a cliche, but fine. I'm fine with cliches. I'm just pointing it out. A lonesome wanderer. Another cliche. I don't mind cliches, but I'm just pointing it out. And then I like the slopes of Alkun. I'd be careful there because it sounds a little bit Wheel of Timey. The slopes of Dragonmount kind of thing. But whatever, that's fine. Arcani shields is interesting that you use Arcani shields here, but not at the top. And I'm not sure what the intention there. I know adding Arcani shield to this paragraph near the front would maybe overloading it, but are you going to call them shields or Arcani shields? Pick one, I would say. Personally, that's what I'd say. Pick one. Just call it a shield and then just describe it. And we can pick up that it's obviously not a normal metal shield strapped to someone's arm or gripped in someone's hand, but rather a energy projection that would be beneficial. In fact, I would say this whole thing needs a bit more description, and I could actually tell quite well what was going on, but I couldn't see much of it in my mind's eye, except for like some of the closer bits like mortar and the shield that you described quite well, and a couple bits and pieces there and there. So that's it. That's my overall thoughts. I see what you're doing here. It's a chance. You're taking a chance. It did draw me in, but I overall don't like it. I don't think it's beneficial, given how steep your learning curve is, to do that to a reader. I would slow it down a little bit and spend more time in description and ease someone into this massive action scene. Or if you want, just open with the action scene and then ease someone into the present. Something like that. But don't keep jerking back and forth when something is this complicated and you're introducing this many terms, names, strange names as well, and a bunch of other things this close to the front. That's my opinion. So if you disagree with me, leave your notes, you, the watcher, in the comments down below. Again, you can click the link in the description to find the original post and tell the author directly what you think. And with that, thank you for listening and see you guys next time.